My name is Emily. I currently live at home with my parents. I live a relaxed life with my reticent father, Steve, and gentle mother, Sophia. But there's someone I could consider my nemesis. That would be Julia, my brother John's wife. Incidentally, there's also my cousin Aaron, who lives nearby. Although the two of them are never together. Both of them whittle away at my psyche from different angles. Emily, isn't it a bit too much to still be living with your parents? Julia says this every time she visits our house, troubling me. She always says this when neither my father nor mother are listening. Her words troubled me, but I humbly responded with, "I've certainly been spoiled since I was young. I didn't want to fight with my brother's wife. My brother has always been busy with work and traveling around the US for work since becoming an adult, so we rarely talk. It's not that we have a bad relationship, but I hesitate to bother him with my troubles. Therefore, I haven't told my busy brother about how. Julia keeps telling me I'm too dependent on my parents. It's only a few times a year that Julia visits our house. In fact, I find Aaron, my cousin who contacts me every other day, more bothersome than Julia, whom I rarely see. I haven't given much thought to Julia. Apparently, Aaron has liked me since we were young and always tries to invite me out. According to my aunt, he's 30 years old now and living at home unemployed. Despite being older than me, his situation frustrates me, especially when he says things like, "Let's date," or "Let's get married." It's very stressful. When we were younger, both our parents and my aunt and uncle used to laugh it off as a childish crush. But now that we're adults, it's not acceptable. My parents and my aunt and uncle are at a loss, especially since he's not willing to work. To be honest, I think they're too lenient for supporting a 30-year-old unemployed person. They should be tougher. What's most stressful is that Aaron misunderstands and thinks I have feelings for him. Even when I say I'm seeing someone else, he says creepy things like, "That's me, right?" Or, "You don't have to say it. You're so cute." How deluded can someone be to interpret things this way? Perhaps I wouldn't have been so harsh if he were just unemployed without a reason. But he didn't take job hunting seriously before graduating from university, thinking companies would be desperate for workers. As a result, he hasn't been employed anywhere. Despite this being his own fault, he still criticizes the companies that didn't hire him, calling them blind or black companies. Nobody really takes his words seriously. Amidst all this, another troubling incident occurred. I think you've heard from John, but I'm going to live in this house from today. You don't have any objections, right? As the weather started warming up at the end of spring, Julia arrived at our house with a moving truck. I looked at my parents' faces, and they were as surprised as I was, staring at me. It seemed that nobody had heard from my brother about Julia moving in. Julia. We haven't heard anything about this. Isn't it too sudden to just move in like this? My gentle mother expressed her concern, and Julia frowned, saying, "I don't know about that. I thought John had properly told you. I've already given up my apartment, so I have nowhere to go. Are you trying to kick me out?" When she says that, it sounds like my parents and I are the bad guys for not accepting her. However, it's a fact that we hadn't heard anything from my brother John about this. And naturally, we hadn't prepared a room for Julia. It's just a nuisance for her to move in under these circumstances. Nevertheless, Julia, knowing that we weren't ready to accept her, let the movers in and started moving things into my workroom, which had been John's room. "Wait, Julia. Please stop." I stopped her when she suddenly and carelessly picked up my desktop computer. I did it because I was worried it would break if handled roughly by a stranger. However, after I stopped her and took back the delicate equipment, Julia glared at me. "I thought I had been warning you, Emily. Warning, you say? I looked at her. There's too much we haven't been told, between what my brother said and her warnings. That's what I thought. I've been saying you're too dependent on your parents, haven't I? Having 2 rooms all to yourself, living an easy life unemployed, it's just the worst. This room is just like a hobby room, right? It's inappropriate for an unemployed person like you to have such a big computer. Do you understand? I was confused. I didn't understand why she thought I was unemployed. I hadn't spoken in detail about my job, but when John brought his fiancée Julia home, he introduced me saying, "My sister works from home." So I thought Julia knew that I was a remote worker, not unemployed. I never imagined she had no understanding of me being a remote worker. What are you talking about? I work from home. This computer is my work tool. I thought that would make Julia realize her mistake, but she just snorted and said, "Is that some kind of home security guard job? Does it even pay? If there's no salary, it's not really a job." You're really childish, you know. If John were here, he would surely defend me and explain my job to Julia. He always speaks up when someone he cares about is wrong. But John isn't here. I can't believe he suddenly allowed Julia to move into our house. Julia was mocking me when my parents arrived. It seems they asked the movers to put Julia's things in the storage room for now and then sent them away. My parents heard what Julia said to me and my mother said, "Julia, how could you say that? Emily is fully independent." Julia laughed it off and said, "Isn't it funny to say she's independent while living at her parents' house? She looks like nothing but unemployed leeching off her parents." Sophia and Steve, maybe it's time you opened your eyes? I suddenly thought that what she said should apply to my cousin Erin, not me. Even though I thought about kicking her out. Her belongings were already moved in and she said she had given up her apartment. So she had nowhere to go. So, reluctantly, I decided to accept her for a while. But this is something I definitely have to tell John. My father thought as he tried to contact him but couldn't get through. I was worried about what had happened to him and at the same time, our house became noisy because of Julia. "I heard about you," she said as she entered my room without permission while I was working on my computer, which I had reluctantly moved from my workroom. "After failing at job hunting, you became a shut-in and still can't find a job. You're really a hopeless person. It's pitiful for your parents to be leeching off such a person." I sighed and said, "That's not about me, it's about my cousin Erin." I tried to correct her misunderstanding, but Julia just laughed loudly, saying, "What's that?" Hilarious. I heard this information from Erin himself, you know? And, aren't you being proposed to by Erin, who earns $13,800 a month? Huh? I blurted out in surprise. Actually, that $13,800 monthly income is mine. It seems my aunt told Erin about it, and the information got passed on. Although I had a good image of my aunt as a kind woman and our relationship didn't end, I decided at that moment to distance myself since everything I tell her ends up reaching Erin. However, Julia, unaware of the truth, said, "That's great. Why don't you let a man earning $13,800 a month support you? Then you could leave this house, and John and I could live here." I could feel anger bubbling up inside me, ignorant as she was. I couldn't help but say to her, "Please don't say unnecessary things. If you keep making such misguided assumptions about me, you'll regret it someday." Julia, rarely seeing me fight back, looked shocked. But then her face turned red with embarrassment as if she had been bitten by someone she considered beneath her. "What's with you? Acting all high and mighty for the unemployed. I hate people like you, unemployed people who act all important. Actually, I just hate the unemployed. Pack your things and get out right now." admittedly, saying, "You'll regret it," was not very mature of me. But I realized it was pointless to say anything more since she wouldn't believe me, and kept calling me the unemployed. Then, an idea to escape from Julia, who treats me unemployed, and my creepy cousin who boasts about my achievements as his own came to mind. Right. If she wants to live in this house, we should just leave. If I'm tired of being wooed daily by my cousin, who lives within walking distance and can see our house, I should move far away, delete my contact information, and change my phone. I decided to put my plan into action immediately and said to Julia, "Okay. I'll pack everything up." Julia, satisfied with my response, left my room. However, I didn't like the idea of just handing over this house to Julia unconditionally. It felt like admitting defeat. So, I thought about demolishing the house. Julia doesn't work as she's a housewife, so I gifted her a 1-week trip to Hawaii. Julia, receiving the trip from me, looked happy and said, "Trying to butter me up now won't change the fact that you're leaving this house, you know?" "Well, I might be a bit nicer to you from now on." She then left for her trip with her suitcase. After that, my parents and I started moving to an apartment we had found before arranging the trip. We put Julia's belongings in a rental storage unit. After all, we had no intention of living with her anymore. By the way, we finally managed to contact my brother. Apparently, my brother John has been working overseas for the past few weeks, too busy to check his personal phone. When we talked, it seemed he had no idea that Julia had gone to our family home. And he was utterly surprised, asking, "How did such a situation arise?" I told him how Julia treated me unemployed and told us to leave the house. So my parents and I moved out and had the house demolished, storing Julia's belongings in a rental storage. John responded with, "I see. I'm sorry. I didn't notice the messages. Give me the address of the storage. I'll take care of the belongings. Don't worry about them anymore." Honestly, I was relieved by his offer, wondering why we had to pay for the storage of her belongings. I did wish he had listened to the story a bit sooner though. Anyway, my parents and I started living in an apartment and quickly had the house demolished. Since we still owned the land, we are considering building an apartment there. Then, after her week-long trip to Hawaii, Julia returned to our town and started bombarding us with frantic calls and messages. I couldn't help but laugh at her panic. When I answered the phone, Julia screamed, "Why is the house gone?" I spoke in a modest tone. "But Julia, I did say, didn't I? I'll take care of everything. So, I just did what I said and left, you know?" To this, Julia exclaimed, "You're lying. You can't just demolish the house on your own, it's not your property. It's a crime, a crime." She doesn't seem to realize that this situation is her own fault. But as far as I'm concerned, she got what she deserved. I firmly told her that house was already transferred to me by my father, so it was in my name. So, it's up to me what to do with the house, right? After all, it's not your property. What? Why would an unemployed daughter be given a house? Is your father insane? She even began to insult my father, but I calmly replied, "That monthly income of $13,800 you heard from my cousin Aaron is actually my earnings. So maintaining the house was no trouble for me." "What? You earn $13,800 a month? But you're unemployed? That's why I keep telling you. I work from home. Even at our first meeting, didn't my brother say? My sister works from home." Eh? That didn't mean housework? I see. So, she mentally converted the fact that I work from home to doing housework, leading to this misunderstanding. I sighed in disbelief. But there's still something I don't understand. Why did you believe the words of Aaron, my cousin with whom I don't live, over what I, who was planning to live with you, said? That's because, after I started living here, one day when I was going home, he approached me. He talked about you and said if I managed to get you out of this house, he would take it, so I could be at ease. Gross. Eh? That man is unemployed and has been following me around, living nearby. Nothing more than that. He probably misunderstood that if you drove me out of the house, I would go to him. Well, I guess Aaron has been fixated on me because I'm his type. But I think he believes that I can support him because he's unemployed. To believe someone who says he earns $13,800 a month and is unemployed. Julia is foolish. What? I believed an unemployed person's words about that unemployment after telling this incident to my aunt and uncle, who had been indulging Aaron until now. They finally lost their patience. They said they were going to kick him out of the house. Eh? Even if he is kicked out, I'm not in the neighborhood anymore. Maybe he'll turn to you, the one who caused him to be kicked out, for help? No, you're kidding. Wait, don't come here. Suddenly Julia screamed, and the phone call ended. Wondering what happened, I received a call from my aunt, saying that after being told he'd be kicked out, Aaron found Julia, who was on the phone in front of the now demolished house, and ran out to catch her. My guess was not wrong, it seems. Over the phone, I could hear Aaron saying, "Take responsibility and become my wife." And Julia refusing. No way. With an unemployed person. I can't live with the unemployed. After all, Julia is married to my brother John. So she can't just ignore that relationship and marry Aaron. But Aaron won't have to worry about that soon. According to a recent message, John is on his way to my aunt and uncle's house with divorce papers. Although Julia can't remarry immediately after the divorce, she will be able to once the waiting period is over. This is what I heard later from John when he arrived at my aunt and uncle's house. Julia ran up to him, saying, "Your sister Emily treated me terribly. She's been bullying me as her sister-in-law. Finally, she deliberately excluded me, moved out, and even demolished the house. All my belongings were stolen." However, John, already informed by us, replied, "Your belongings were stored in a rental storage. And I've sent them to your parents' house. My stuff has been moved to a single-person apartment where I'm going to live. So no worries." More than the news about her belongings, Julia was shocked to hear that John was planning to live in a single-person apartment. To a surprised Julia, John presented the divorce papers, saying, "You moved into my parents' house because you lost the rent money for the apartment playing gambling, right? You thought you could use all the money I sent for gambling? I don't need a dishonest spouse like that." He made her sign the divorce papers on the spot. This way, John and Julia got divorced. But Aaron, who was closely observing everything, misunderstood, thinking, "Julia got divorced to be with me." He demanded, "Don't go to gambling, or you'll get a slap each time. Find a job quickly and support me." He got so aggressive that the police were called. Deemed uncontrollable, Aaron was sent to a construction company known to my aunt and uncle. And now he's living in a dormitory, watched by others to prevent his escape, working every day. As for Julia, she returned to her strict parents, got severely scolded for the entire ordeal, and was told that she'd be disowned if she goes to gambling even once. Now, she's diligently working to repay the money she wasted from John's remittances on gambling. I managed to eliminate 2 sources of stress at once, and am now finally able to lead a peaceful life with my parents, without any worries.